All our comments to start this episode are going to be like, you guys took 4 minutes to get into this.
Nope, I'm editing all of this out. All right, so Don Mattingly. Let's go to story number 1.
Oh, no, for sure. Clubhouse culture is something we're going to talk about. Don Mattingly being added. Does this signal a more serious, focused Blue Jays in 2023? We'll discuss the value of going big. We just watched Matthew Boyd get $10 million for 1 year. So is there more value in spending big on one of the top free agents than there is trying to find value in those middling tier that you're still spending an arm and a leg to get? We'll get into it, do some math, see what it comes out as. Ross Stripling's market getting hotter every day as we speak about guys who are getting a ton of money. Was it a mistake to not offer him a qualifying offer? And of course, as the pitching market skyrockets, will this front office bet on Jose Barrios bouncing back over acquiring 2 starters? Something we'll discuss. And the Yankees make a record-setting offer to Aaron Judge, but the Giants and Dodgers still looming large. We'll end the show with what you watching this weekend. By popular demand.
By popular demand.
By listeners' request.
Yeah. All right.
Let's get into clubhouse culture. This is a tough one because it's such an intangible element. And last year, the Blue Jays, let's face it, man, I really do believe they were one of the more fun, bombastic groups in baseball, right? Like we had the last year, last year was the trailer quote. This is my house from Vladdy. The home run jacket carried on for a second straight year. And then all of a sudden, Charlie Montoyo gets fired midway through the season, only to have major pieces of this core come out and truly act like they saw this coming. In fact, Bo Bichette even specifically brought up accountability, which was kind of eye-opening at the time. Now, I know, Adam, we've talked about this. Clubhouse culture, it is really difficult, intangible to evaluate, right? Especially from the fans' perspective, because we're not privy to what goes on in the clubhouse. We don't know the actual dynamics at play. But it is interesting to see this team take a different direction. And I'm curious what you think on this. But with bringing Don Mattingly in, and we spoke on this when the hiring was announced, but he's kind of like, he's like my grandpa was, right? He's very much a against any sort of tomfoolery.
Okay.
I can see the term enough horseplay coming out of Donnie Baseball's mouth.
It'll be painted above the tunnel on the way out from the clubhouse.
That's right.
Horseplay.
That's the what was the soccer guy's name again? The show where the
Ted Lasso?
Yeah, Ted Lasso. I can't believe I didn't remember that. That'll be the Ted Lasso. The sign they touch is no horseplay.
Man, all right.
And then we also watched this front office ship Teoscar off. Obviously, I'm not saying that this was about any sort of negative clubhouse culture. I think Teoscar truly was a beloved man within that clubhouse. And obviously, I think this move was a lot more about clearing out money and trying to balance an unbalanced roster and grabbing a controllable, high-end, high-leverage arm, which, as we're seeing in free agency, is becoming very, very expensive. But I wonder if breaking up the barrio, right, which is where the cool kids are in the dugout. That's what they were calling it last year, the barrio, the George Springer, Vladdy, Gurriel, Teoscar, right? They were always joking around and having fun. And I don't see that as there being a problem with that in baseball, but I do wonder if this was a calculated move by this front office to kind of shake that up a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know. For me, the money is the big one.
Yeah.
He was just coming to the end of his contract. And I still think that is just the factor is that they weren't about to give him 20 million a year for the next 5 years, and I think that's going to be close to what we see him get next year in free agency. Um, unless he has a massive setback in Seattle this year, which could happen. But you know, all accounts are we're going to replace him with hopefully a more affordable option. You know, we don't need to get into the Lars Newbar talk again today, but
Yeah.
that felt like that was that's the idea is go with a guy who's at the early end of his team control window and then spend that money elsewhere, right? Vladdy's going to get expensive soon. Bobichet's going to get expensive soon, whether that's with Toronto or elsewhere.
They desperately need another starting pitcher to replace Ryu, and you can't count on Mitch White and Yusei Kikuchi in this rotation, so you're going to need money in starting for the starting rotation. And I mean, they could flip it, right? Like we've talked this before. Whether they fill their pitching need with a trade or free agency, or whether they fill the outfield with a trade or free agency, it's going to be one or the other. And I don't really care how they get it done as long as they get it done. But do you think that it's possible? And I only bring this up because I know that there is a portion of the fan base that felt like maybe there was too much horseplay, tomfoolery taking place this last season, and that maybe a more focused, accountable approach is something that a team trying to win the World Series should be on. Do you think this has anything to do about these most recent moves with the Blue Jays, or am I blowing this out of proportion?
I don't necessarily think Teoscar's departure is a step in that direction, but I do think the Mattingly hire is. Um, do I think the home run jacket makes a return next year with Don Mattingly's influence? I don't know. I kind of thought that it was going to come back next year, even after Teoscar was gone.
Yeah.
But now I am starting to question how this team is going to look. Um, I mean, you don't play for the Yankees for 14 years without figuring out how to play baseball minus the fun, right? So
I'm really curious what all of you watching think about this. Do you think that this clubhouse should be more serious? Would you like to see the home run jacket kind of retired this season? And I'm not saying stop having fun by any means, because I really enjoyed watching the horseplay, if you will, on this team in 2022. However, maybe there is something to be said for a more focused approach when it comes to your game to game culture and your game to game approach. And you look at the Houston Astros and you look at the uh, Philadelphia Phillies is a great example, right? These were the two teams that went to the World Series and they were still having fun. And you know what? They were still celebrating and stuff, but they did have a different feel than the Blue Jays had. And I just wonder if maybe we've graduated from fun loving team
what
in development phase to a more serious, contending, focused team.
what do you mean they had a different feel than the Blue Jays?
The
You mean
Blue
like
Jays,
watching them at the end of
yeah,
October felt differently?
I would say so,
Is
yes.
there any chance that that's just what it feels like to watch the World Series though? Like
That's a great point.
were you watching the Astros in late September?
No, I mean, I'm just literally going off of watching the Blue Jays all year long. I you know darn well I haven't
No, no, no,
watched
I know.
162 games of the
No, but
Astros,
this is
but
what I'm saying is it is a tough comparison to go, well, the Phillies and Astros sure look differently at the end of October than the Blue Jays did in mid-July. Like of course. I
and
just
you're
wonder
making
if
a
the
very
Blue
good point.
Jays would have also, looked differently, everything else
I
being
would
the
hope
same,
so.
but we're playing in the
I would
World
hope so.
Series.
And you're making a very good point. Obviously, the higher the stakes, the more focused and serious you're going to take these games. And I am by no means saying that mid-May they should just be miserable in the dugout. That is not at all what I'm saying. I'm just curious if maybe this front office is trying to skew them a little bit more on the serious side of things than they have been in the past. I don't
I
even
do
see it
think
as
you're right. I do think that is the case. I think that you don't go hire Don Mattingly for any reason other than we need him to get these guys in line a little bit, you know? Like, I
Mhm,
mean, maybe that's not the right word, but this is something we talked about kind of at length last year was, who in that clubhouse really goes around and pokes Vladdy in the chest and goes, "Hey, listen up, you smart ass." Like whatever. Like when a guy needs to be grabbed by the scruff of the collar and slammed against the wall, who in
mhm.
that clubhouse could even do that, right? And that's something that I've thought this team has been lacking. Um, Obviously, I'm not suggesting a literal physical altercation, a Shea Hillenbrand versus John Gibbons esque uh, throwdown is in the best interest of this team or necessary. But something on that side of the parenting talk, right? Of like, hey, we could go out inside and we can toboggan all day long, but first we got to shovel the driveway.
Buddy, I am so curious what the comments are going to say here, like what everyone feels about clubhouse culture because it's such an intangible, right? Like it's such an aspect of the game that every time you talk to any of these guys we bring on the show here, right, whether minor league or major league or former players, they always are very honest that clubhouse culture is a thing
Of course.
and it does matter. But it's so difficult as an outsider to judge where it's at and how big of a deal certain moves are, right? Like the Teoscar thing, I think you're right. I think it's just total coincidence that he was the fun-loving guy in the barrio, and I'm just tying that together with Don Mattingly. But I'm curious where everyone is on this because would you like to see a more serious approach from the Blue Jays? And I am by no means when I say that saying let's have zero fun. Like, I still want to see bat flips in big moments. I still want to see fist pumps after big strikeouts. I still want to see the boys having a little dance party every once in a while. But I do wonder if maybe this is something that we're going to watch, especially come the later part of the season in 2023. If we are going to see a more stoic Blue Jays organization team.
We'll see how it shakes out. I mean, you got to take ball serious. You got to play to win and all that stuff. But the fun does keep you going during that grind, during those dog days of summer, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
and it's interesting because I think this is publicly a new phenomenon, letting the kids have fun. But historically, the fun and games have been going on just behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like I forget who we were interviewing last week, but we brought up the idea of like Bull Durham, the wrestling in the mud scene, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
that movie's 40 years old at this point, or 30 years old or whatever, right? Like shenanigans and baseball go hand in hand.
Yes.
This is just like the first generation where that's spilling out onto the field.
Yes.
But to think
And it's
that
about time.
the Yankees of old and the 90s and to think that they weren't effing around with each other in the locker room is like, you're
Yeah,
crazy.
of course. Of
So
course. It's too long of a season not to
it's
have
too
a
long
little
of a
fun.
season to not have a little fun. So that's the only change, in my opinion, is just that now this is starting to be seen publicly as opposed to it was happening on the bus rides and the plane rides and around the clubhouse in the past.
So, hello, walk-off community. We have a big guest appearing on Wednesday. Of course, we are in the middle of the baseball meetings and news is going to be breaking. Stuff is going to be happening. And we're so thrilled to have back on the show from Blue Jays Central and Sportsnet, former Expos catcher, Joe Siddall. So feel free to drop any questions you may have for Joe in the comments below, or you can join the Discord link in the show notes and get your questions in there. Joe Siddall this Wednesday. Subscribe and like, everybody. Thanks for following along. Cheers.